Uh, my name is Jahangir Khatak, and I am the co-director of the Center for Community and Ethnic Media at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. I joined my colleague and the center's other co-director, Karen Painter, who is also the editor of voicesofny.org, in joining both of us in welcoming you to the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. We are very excited to be organizing this event today, and the idea is to promote awareness about the different immigration scams that are targeting the different immigrant communities. And we have a very distinguished panel joining us who will be talking about the different scams which are targeting the communities here. We will have this event pretty not really very formal. Each of the panelists will be speaking for about 30-35 minutes, no, like 10 minutes, and then we'll have a follow-up, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So whosoever is interested in asking questions, you can raise your hand, and I or Jennifer Chang, my colleague, will bring the mic to you so that you can ask your questions. Let me introduce the panelists. The first to my left is Phyllis Coven. She is the District Director of USCIS New York. Next to her is Camille Macular. She is the Director of Legal Initiatives, New York Immigration Coalition. And then Mayerling Rivera. She is the Co-Director of Manhattan DA's Office Immigrant Affairs Program. I welcome all of you, and I request Phyllis to give an opening statement, and then we'll follow up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's really lovely to be here in this beautiful center. I wish I could go to school again. Right. First, I'd like to start off with just a little background about our agency, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. We are the federal agency that oversees immigration to the United States. The State Department, is our partner in this massive responsibility overseas. But once an immigrant is here in the United States, they work with our agency in order to apply for any number of immigration benefits. We adjudicate everything from applications for asylum to work authorization to green cards. And of course, the crown jewel of all these benefits is U.S. citizenship. We know that these benefits are in high demand, and we adjudicate millions of cases a year nationwide. We also know that the process can be very confusing, especially for those who are still learning English. This high demand, combined with confusion about the process, unfortunately creates a window of opportunity for scammers. Scammers prey upon consumers, taking advantage of the fact that so many want immigration benefits, but are also unsure of how to get them. So, for example, a scammer might say that they are a lawyer with a specialized understanding of immigration lawyer, but that person might not even have a law degree. My colleague, Mayerling, of the DA's office here, will be able to share with you the top 5 types of scams here in New York and give you some real-life examples of scams that have led to criminal prosecution. But at USCIS, we see it as our responsibility to not just adjudicate immigration benefits, but we also see it as our responsibility to inform people how to apply for these benefits and how to protect them from scammers who pretend to be helpful. That is why we were so very honored in October 2013 to help stand up the Protecting Immigrant New Yorkers Task Force. We call it PINY, a group of more than 20 organizations that work together, some of whom are represented here today. We are a very diverse coalition of community organizations, but also government offices and law enforcement agencies that really work together to explore ways to collaboratively combat immigration services fraud in New York City. Together, we also engage in community outreach through various means, including preparing customer rights publications, holding community town halls, and just as we are doing today, speaking to the press to help us get the word out. And we do appreciate your efforts to get the correct information out to your communities, because this is really the best antidote to the wrong information. And we really believe you have a very key role to play in combating immigration fraud. My colleagues will be sharing with you some important tips on how immigrants can avoid scams, but I do want to close with just a few and emphasize them because they are especially important to us at USCIS. You know, there's an expression, imitation is the highest form of flattery, but in the case of these scams, imitation is really the highest form of deception. There are people who will actually pretend that they are USCIS. They may call immigrants on the phone pretending to be immigration service officers, or design websites that look like our website to lure people in. So my tips for immigrants today are, make sure that when you think you are working with USCIS, that you really are working with USCIS. Make sure that you are using the official .gov website, not .com. And never give payment or personal information over the phone who anyone claims to be a USCIS official. We simply do not make calls for immigration interviews or to provide details about immigration cases. So thank you for sharing that important information. Thank you for sharing the words and the tips that we have in our public relation materials that we make available to you here today, and for working with us on this important issue.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Muy buenas tardes a mis amigos latinos. My name is Mayerling Rivera, and I am an assistant district attorney and also the director of my office's Immigrant Affairs Unit. The district attorney in Manhattan is the office that is in charge of prosecuting crime that occurs in the borough of Manhattan. As you all know, Manhattan is one of the most diverse cities in the world. As such, my office realized that immigrants are particularly vulnerable to crime and also one of the populations that's most reluctant to report if they are victims of crime. There are different reasons for this. You know, many immigrants have a fear of deportation, particularly if they are undocumented. Some immigrants distrust government. Sometimes there's a language barrier. Many immigrants work 2 jobs, long hours, so there are time constraints that put barriers up in terms of reporting crime. So after seeing that, my office realized that what was necessary was a unit that dedicated its resources to immigrants. So in 2007, the district attorney at that time, Robert Morgenthau, created what we call an Immigrant Affairs Unit. We were the first program of its kind in the nation. Following the creation of our program, in the past few years, several other jurisdictions have opened units of their own. Brooklyn now has an Immigrant Affairs Unit, as does Queens, and Nassau County on Long Island also has an Immigrant Affairs Unit. So after we created our unit, all of these other units followed. The purpose of the unit is twofold. First, it's our job to investigate and prosecute crimes of fraud that are committed against immigrants. Secondly, It's very important to us to educate the immigrant community to prevent people from becoming victims. And we do that through forming alliances with clergy, with different not-for-profit organizations, different government partners, as well as we've developed a very good relationship with different consulates in order to facilitate referrals and working together in collaboration. I know Phyllis mentioned I talked to you about the top 5 scams that we see. The first, it's basically the unauthorized practice of law. And that's when, quite simply, someone acts like they're a lawyer, gives advice as if they're a lawyer, and they're just not a lawyer, and they're not authorized to do that. Within that are what we call notario scams. And those are people that are notaries that pretend that because they're notaries that they are lawyers. And that confusion exists because in many Latin American countries, notarios or notaries are in fact lawyers. Criminals take advantage of that title and they use that title to charge people as if they were in fact lawyers. We have people that pose as immigration officials when they're not, or they claim to have connections to someone in government or in immigration that can help people with their immigration problems, and they in fact do not. We have people that offer immigration options that don't actually exist. People say that there's a DREAM Act or there's some other lottery that doesn't really exist and give people false hope that way. We also have people out there that are charging for things that are free, USCIS forms that are actually free, and they're charging for those forms even though they're free. So those are the top 5 scams. I'll talk very quickly about some cases that we've actually prosecuted. I'll give you 3 examples, real life scenarios, things that really happened. We had a gentleman who owned, quote unquote, a law firm in Midtown Manhattan. He operated that law firm for 14 years. He served as a consultant for a major media outlet. And after 14 years of practicing, it was discovered that he, in fact, wasn't an attorney. Even though he had served as a legal consultant and put himself out as a lawyer for 14 years. He promised people green cards and different immigration benefits and never, in fact, made due on those promises. He ended up pleading guilty to the unauthorized practice of law from 1995 to 2009. So he practiced law illegally for 14 years. Secondly, we had a man who took advantage of the fact that he was a volunteer for the United Nations. He told people that because of his position as a volunteer for the UN, he could get them temporary protective status. He charged people thousands of dollars for this. He actually set up consultations at the UN where he would promise them these benefits, and those people got nothing in return for their money. He was convicted after a jury trial and actually received a sentence of 5 to 10 years incarceration. Lastly, we had a guy who worked out of his car in Washington Heights. And he would tell people that he was an immigration official. And he actually carried a gun in a holster and had what looked like a federal shield. He also promised people benefits and told them that if they didn't pay him, that he would get them deported through his fictitious position. He also was prosecuted and sentenced to 2 to 6 years incarceration. So we do take these cases very seriously. What we need is for people to actually report them so that they can get to us. There are many different variations to all of these scams. You know, every day with every new law or every promise of a new law, new scams are created. Criminals find a way to take advantage of unsuspecting immigrants that are just trying to make a life for themselves here. The only way we see we can combat this is through doing events like this, and through education. So thank you very much.
Camille.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us here today. So my name is Camille Macular. I work for the New York Immigration Coalition. I know that many of you have worked with us in the past. We're a statewide organization, an umbrella policy and advocacy group. We have over 175 member organizations that serve immigrants throughout New York State. And my job in particular is to work with anything that has to do with immigration law, which is how I became involved in these efforts, in the work with Phyllis, Mayerling, and our Piney Task Force partners. And since 2013, the NYIC has led the Piney Task Force. And we've been really privileged to see it grow from about 10 organizations to 26 currently today that are potentially 27 that are members of our task force and that meet together once a month to discuss issues relating to immigration services fraud and to explore the common ground that we all have. You wouldn't think that government, law enforcement, and advocacy community groups have a lot in common, but in this instance, we really do. It's a problem that we all want to see addressed. It's a problem we all want to fight back against. And the Piney Task Force has really, I think, allowed us to do that in a very unique, creative, and I think beginning now really effective manner. Immigration services fraud, and I really want to insist on that term and not notario fraud, not unauthorized practice of immigration law, because it's really very encompassing of a problem, and it is one that plagues our communities. And every time immigration is in the news, we see scams skyrocket because the confusion grows, questions grow, and individuals don't know where to turn to for help, and often they turn to the wrong place for advice. And as the pamphlets over there from USCIS tell you, the wrong help can really sometimes hurt. Recently, I don't think there has been a day that has gone by that immigration has not been in the news, sometimes for good reasons. For example, the governor or the mayor making it easier for victims of certain crimes to get U visa certifications, more often than not for bad reasons, at least from my perspective. There's an injunction against the president's programs for administrative relief. There's a lot of backlash against many immigrant communities these days. All of this leads to scams, leads to fraud, leads to questions that the wrong people are answering. And I'm really excited to be here today. And one question, I know we'll be answering questions, but one question I want to pose all of you is how can we work more closely together to get the word out there? Because one of the biggest issues that we have is getting the word out there in a trustworthy manner. Many of these scammers, many of these individuals that Mayerling and Phyllis referred to, they're in the community and they exploit that. They exploit the fact that they are there in the community with individuals that they share a language, they share a culture, they share an experience in the country together. They face the same obstacles, they face the same challenges, they may have the same history, and they exploit that for harmful purposes. And we are trying to counter that on the community level by trying to ally ourselves with individuals who have the same level of trust but can get the correct message out there. And I think that's very critical because we see a lot of the reasons why we don't see these issues come to light more often. I think there's several of them, but the first one is that, first of all, individuals don't often know that they've been scammed. They don't realize it. They're being given bad advice, but it's so confusing. It's a very complicated legal system, and they don't understand what's right and what's wrong and what they're qualified for, what they're eligible for, what they're not. So it takes a very long time for them to realize that maybe what happened, the advice they got wasn't the best advice. The second one is they're afraid. They're desperately afraid of jeopardizing their situation in the United States. They're desperately afraid of government and law enforcement. And I think that it's up to us to say there are individuals in New York, and we are blessed in New York with our agencies, but there are individuals and offices in New York, certainly, who will protect, who will help, who will not just refer you to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who will try to uphold your rights. No matter what. And if you've been a victim of a crime, who will prosecute that crime? The third one, honestly, and this is the one that makes me the saddest and the one I really hope to overcome, is that there is an expectation that scams will happen in immigrant communities. And when it happens, individuals often feel like that was the risk they took, and they knew this could happen, and they don't know where to turn. And not knowing where to turn is what the Piney Task Force has very diligently been working on for over 2 years now. We want to make sure that individuals are aware of resources. We want to make sure that they know that there are agencies, Phyllis and Mayerling represent 2 out of the 25 on our task force, that are there and that are willing to listen to your story, that are willing to come and try to help you find a solution. And we've done that through several ways. Last year we released, actually earlier this year, we released a resource guide for law enforcement, government, and advocacy agencies to sort of try to put all in one place all of the information that you may ever need to address these issues. And the resource guide was launched in February. It was launched with an accompanying website. The website is protectingimmigrants.org. You can download the guide there as a PDF. You can also download, access a lot of the information. You can see the latest press releases, the latest information from all the partners, the work that they're doing to combat these issues. You can also download Know Your Rights flyers. You can download posters that are translated in 6 languages with information on how to report fraud. And that brings me to my biggest ask of all of you is we need people to report fraud. Even if you weren't the victim, if you see something going on, report it. Because you're not just helping yourself. You're not just helping potentially the one person you know who was a victim. You're protecting your community by speaking out. A lot of times people are afraid of speaking out against another community member, but there's safety in numbers. So report fraud. And one of the greatest things we've achieved through our task force is empowering the New York State New American Hotline, which is run out of Catholic Charities. It is not a government office, to accept complaints. We worked on a common complaint form. They can take in complaints. The complaints get distributed to all 5 of the district attorneys, to the New York State Attorney General, to the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, and it gets uploaded into the Federal Trade Commission's Consumer Sentinel database so that a record is created. The number is 1-800-566-7636 if you're calling from a New York area code, 212-419-3737 if you're calling from a non-New York area code. We need people to call. We need people to report. You can report anonymously. You can report on behalf of somebody else. You can report something you've seen on the street that didn't look right to you. Just let us know where we need to be focusing on. You are the eyes and ears on the grounds of your communities. You need to help us so that we can then go out there and help them and make sure that resources are being focused in the right areas. The hotline has access to over 200 languages on a language line. They're open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. And beyond that, we just want immigrant New Yorkers to know that we care, that this is an important issue and it's a big deal to all of us here in New York, and we want to get that message out there that we want to help, and we don't think that you should be a victim of these kinds of schemes. We don't think that you should give up on your dreams of being here in the United States lawfully, to be here for yourselves and your families. There are people who will work hard to make sure that you can achieve that. Thank you.
I'd like to add something to, especially in terms of reporting the scams.
Sure. You know, it's easy when we live here in New York to sometimes take things for granted, right? We've got the best water, the best pizza, the best Chinese food, the best pretzels, the best hot dogs. We have a really pro-immigrant city, right, which is exceptional. And it really is also exceptional that we have the kind of collaboration that we've described here, and that the Manhattan DA started this rage of having DA offices that actually are interested in prosecuting this fraud. And it is also really exceptional for stakeholders, NGOs that we call them, non-governmental organizations, to work as closely with federal law enforcement agencies as they do in this piney task force. And we're really very grateful for that. And as I mentioned earlier, with respect to reporting and generally sharing information, just last week in my offices, which are 26 Federal Plaza, probably a building people know somewhat downtown, we all came together and had a big immigration fair where we had stakeholders, 25 or so of them, there with all their materials to give good, accurate information to the immigrants who visited us there, and we want to perpetuate that kind of communication. We did that event during National Consumer Protection Week, but we really would like to ask you to help us make it National Consumer Protection Week for immigrants all the time. You are known to your communities. You are a friendly voice to your communities. And as Camille somewhat alluded to, immigration fraud sort of sometimes carries with it a bit of shame in addition to some disappointment. People feel ashamed. Gee, how could I be so stupid to have given that guy $5,000? How could I have been so stupid as to give away my life's earnings for something that wasn't real? But by talking about it more, you can really help people overcome that shame. So we know that as representatives of the ethnic media, you all have your crosses to bear, and you know, you need to have advertisements at times and have your own challenges in terms of how and what you communicate. But boy, if you have opportunities to run public service announcements on this issue, to feature stories about these issues, you could really make a difference in how we get this information out and how we encourage people not to feel ashamed and to come forward to the authorities who here in New York really can provide them with help.
You like to add something to what she just
Yeah,
mentioned?
Just adding to this about how we can all work together. Us as the government, you as the media. Media serves such an important role in ethnic communities. It is their one source of information. Our office has worked with the media in really innovative ways. For instance, we partnered with Univision, which is a big Spanish language outlet that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and we created a video where we talked about fraud, tips to prevent fraud. We made it entertaining, and that video is played in consulate waiting areas, so that when people are sitting there waiting, to get their consulate papers processed, they can watch and see how they can identify being a victim, how they can report if they're a victim. We also did what we call a fraud prevention week, where we partnered with TV and radio stations, and we did a sort of telethon where people would call in with their questions regarding fraud. We get many referrals from media outlets because as the primary source of information for these immigrant communities, you're also the people that they trust with their problems. So they will call you before they will call me. I mean, guaranteed. So many times we get referrals from media outlets where they've gotten people reporting cases to them and they send them to us, and we have a very good working relationship that way. There are different things that can be done. I think that we can all work very effectively together. We are lucky in New York that we have this. Many other places do not. And so use us like we want to use you. And thank you.
It occurred to me that we've been telling you a lot about what happens when things go wrong, but also we should probably tell you where you can go for good help, right? For legitimate help, and how to know that you're getting legitimate help. If you go to our website, protectingimmigrants.org, under the Community Resources tab, you'll see there's some flyers that you can download. What to do if you're looking for help, where to go, what are the red flags, if you have a lawyer, how to know that the help is legitimate. Make sure that if don't pay in cash, if you're paying in cash, either way, make sure you're getting receipts, make sure you know where you can go and look for extra information. But also remember that only lawyers or BIA accredited representatives can provide legal services to immigrants. A lawyer is somebody who went to law school, passed the bar exam in New York. You can check on the New York court's website to make sure someone is licensed, although often an immigration lawyer may be licensed in another state. But if you call the courts here in New York, or if you call the hotline number I gave you earlier, they'll help you figure out if your lawyer is licensed. A BIA accredited representative is a non-lawyer who is either the staff or volunteer of a nonprofit agency that has taken sufficient training and has shown to the U.S. Department of Justice that they have sufficient resources so as to be allowed to provide legal services to immigrants for a very low or no fee. So they can't charge you a lot of money. They have to work for a nonprofit organization. If that's not true, then the person isn't authorized. If they're not a lawyer or a rep, they're not authorized to provide you legal services. And just so we're clear, when I'm talking about legal services, I'm talking about picking out the form for a fee, telling you what form to fill out. I'm talking about filling out the form or informing you of how to fill out the form, telling you where to file it, what evidence to attach with it, what benefits you might qualify for. All of that falls under the purview of law. It's the practice of law, and only those categories of individuals can practice it. And so if we're going to tell you, why you shouldn't go to the people who aren't allowed, figured we'd also tell you who is.
Thank you so much. Now we open the floor for questions. So, Isu.
Hi, thank you for being here today. This question is for Mrs. Coven. As an immigrant, and I think for many of us, USCIS is a ghost scary agency because you see no one from USCIS unless you have an appointment when you're sweating and you're praying God that whatever you're looking for there, you're going to have it. So what efforts are you making to connect with communities? Because I believe that people are afraid of something that they don't know. So if they knew you better, if they could see people coming from USCIS and knowing that, well, these people really exist, maybe it will be better.
Well, thank you for that question. And that's exactly why we had this immigration fair on March 11th at 26 Federal Plaza. The goal was to show that USCIS can and is a welcoming place for immigrants. I understand those fears and those challenges, and I always say, we have something that people want so much, they would stand outside our building on their heads at 3 o'clock in the morning to get what we have to give them. And we have to make it a good customer service experience. And it's really the first experience that people in this country are having with their government. And for that reason, it should be a positive one. And we want it to be an example of what it means to be a citizen or a member of civic society. So we had this immigration fair. That's one thing. We have very good materials these days that give really good information about immigration benefits. We have a wonderful woman in New York. Granted, there's only one. Her name is Shaikonia Burden, who's our community relations officer. And she attends events all over the city at all hours of the day and night to try to spread the word. But there's no question we should really try to do as much of that as we can. We also nowadays, we were talking about movies, we also in our waiting rooms when people are nervous are trying to play all the happy messages about USCIS and being there. We also actually made a beautiful movie about our own officers. I'd say a good third or more are naturalized citizens themselves and have an intimate sense of the immigrant experience. So there's really no limit to what we should and can try to do to make it a welcoming place. And if you have suggestions for us on that, we'd really be happy to take them.
Hello, hi. My name is Abu Tahir, and I'm on behalf of Bangla Patrika and Time Television, which is represent Bangladeshi community in North America. I have a question, which is day before yesterday, when the Brussels terrorist attack happened, then there was a report came that the U.S. immigration, they tightened their security, and if anyone came from abroad, they will ask question. It will be a very stiff question if anyone want to get in. So then I found a lot of people, they have kind of anxiety whether they should fly from abroad to come because they will be subject of a lot of question. So my question is whether the same policy is going on or it was just like temporary one-day program, which is end. Number two, in terms of the diversity in USCIS. What kind of, once it was called by a certain color, club, US immigration. So if you could just tell us about the diversity, the racial diversity of the USCIS, that would be great. Thank you.
Actually, those questions are kind of connected, actually, because I can't speak to what the policy might be overseas or the policy at the airports. And that's because our agency is now, or our department, is made up of 3 immigration agencies. One is mine, USCIS, which deals with petitions for immigration benefits, or legal immigration in a way. The second is ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which primarily is in charge of investigations in the United States and also runs our detention centers. And the third is Customs and Border Patrol, and they run the airports and the ports of entry along the border and the rest of it. So I'm afraid I really can't speak for those practices or any new initiatives that might be undertaken. But I will say that on behalf of the department is pro-immigration. We have the security of the United States as one of our highest priorities, but also implementing the laws of the United States with integrity. And integrity means being fair. Integrity means being astute. Integrity means giving people their fair opportunity to make their claim. So I know we have a very extensive website, and my hunch is that our Customs and Border Patrol colleagues do as well. And that might be a good source to go to if you're looking into any sort of changes that might be taking place at the border. I think that kind of addressed both your issues. Oh, diversity? I really want to see one day if maybe we can have one of these events at our office, and we can show you some of the diversity that we have among our staff. We actually have a wonderful movie, and the producer of that movie's in this room now. But I'd love to show you and introduce to you our staff, and you can see their great diversity and really their great understanding and compassion for the immigrant experience.
Okay. Hi, I'm Soyoung Kim from the Korea Times. So I'll give you simple questions. So first, what could be the best contact point to report the immigration scam, like USCIS or DA office? Because sometimes, like when I make a call to call the government agents, they're like, "Oh, we're not in charge of that. You have to call somewhere else." So like it's kind of confusing. And my next question is, even like I got a lot of calls from the Korean immigrants, and then like asking about the immigration things, and then even we are not in charge of that, and then the reason why they call us is because they have a lot of language barrier, and then like you said, there are a lot of sources on the website, but the thing is that they don't really read English, and they don't really even go to the website. So like, do you think anyone who doesn't speak English, they can get the direct translation service and things like that?
Yeah, I think the hotline is definitely the right place to call for the situation that you pose right now. The New York State New American Hotline, which is 1-800-566-7636 from a New York area code, and a non-New York area code is 212-419-3737. And the reason why is they can take the complaints. They have access to language line interpreters, so they can get somebody in Korean on the line to interpret. And they've been run by Catholic Charities for, I want to say close to 15 years, but at over 10. And their primary purpose initially was to refer to legal services, to refer someone for free to a reliable legal help. And now they can also take a complaint, but they can help answer questions. If there's been issues in the news, they can answer questions about that. They can have a conversation with the caller and figure out what's going on. They're trained, they're overseen by immigration lawyers, and they can sort of have that back and forth and really try to make sure that the person who's calling gets all of the appropriate help. They can be referred to other resources if they need health, if they have health-related or social benefits-related questions. They can file a complaint. They can get a referral to a legal service provider. And all of it is free, and it's a toll-free call in New York.
Now,
We might want to do a little bit more elaborate answer to that, Mayerling.
well, so, you know, I work for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. That means that my office only has jurisdiction over crimes that happen in Manhattan. So we also run a hotline. It's 212-335-3600. However, that's only for crimes that occur in Manhattan. That's a difficult jurisdictional question to answer for a regular person. The hotline is covered by people that speak different languages, so language is not a barrier. However, we also receive complaints from the New Americans Hotline. So if someone calls the New Americans Hotline, if they don't know exactly, you know, where they're supposed to really go, the New Americans Hotline will figure that out and also filter out the complaints to all the different district attorneys' offices, the attorney general's offices, and figure out where it should go.
And my agency, I dare say, we're not perfect in terms of translations, but on this issue, we're not so bad. And I think we have some materials in Korean over here, and they do describe the things to watch out for in order not to be scammed. And you're welcome to share them, to repeat them, and give us some suggestions as to how we can do better.
All right, I have a scenario. I'm sure it's no lie that a lot of people get married to gain that legal status, and they not necessarily get married for love. So I've heard of a situation where this person paid all this money to get married to a citizen, but this citizen exploited this immigrant, and, you know, if you don't give me more money, I'm not gonna sign whatever papers there's needed to be signed or whatever. And this person just had to give money and give money and give money in order to maybe sometime gain that legal status. How do you report that if you know that both ways are doing something wrong?
Yeah. So, you know, we have many scenarios where the person, the victim, and that person is a victim of the fraud, was maybe, you know, just in search of the American dream and trying to figure out the best way to achieve that. In that quest to achieve that dream, that's how people end up getting defrauded. And it doesn't only happen in that context. You have people going to, you know, someone that says that their cousin works for USCIS, and that because their cousin works for USCIS, they can get them preferential treatment for getting their immigration situation resolved. You know, one of the things that we always say to victims is that one of the things that we do protect is their immigration status. So if someone comes to the district attorney's office as a victim, we're not going to use what information they give us with regard to their status to use against them and to share with the federal authorities. That information stays private, and we protect them as a victim. That being said, you know, we investigate every case, you know, individually. You know, many times when someone perpetrates that type of scam, they don't do it to one person or two people or three people. You know, many times it's a pattern. So we look at that. So, you know, every victim that comes to us, we investigate their claim. They're not going to get in trouble. We treat every victim just like we would every other.
I wonder if in this instance, too, you kind of gave us a hardball there because you have some underlying fraud. And the bottom line is, do not lie in the immigration business. It always catches up with you.
But there is no lie that
if
a
we
lot of
change the scenario a little bit, right, and someone did marry for love, but then their spouse was abusing them and holding out the continued immigration benefit as a threat, there is a law which can help protect that kind of individual, the Violence Against Women Act, for one. And that's a resource that other people should also know about.
There's also a U visa and that is for victims of typically violent crime. And if someone can show that they were, a victim of a crime, that they reported that crime, and that they cooperated with the authorities in the investigation of that crime, the government does grant them a benefit, which is called a U visa.
I also think in that situation that you described, your initial scenario, first of all, I do think the fraud should be reported, but also maybe have them consult with an immigration attorney, because if they married for that purpose, but nothing ever got filed, it's a far different situation from they married, they filed something, so they actually did go forward with the fraud, if that makes sense. It's all, but then maybe they qualify for a U visa because U visa forgives fraud the way other green card application or a green card application wouldn't. Like, it's very complicated, right? And so you would want to talk to an immigration lawyer, but I don't think you should be dissuaded, because I think what Mayerling was basically saying is that at the end of the day, this person was a victim. Like, yeah, they didn't do a great thing, but we understand, and I think, certainly most agencies that deal with this, they understand that it's not always I'm a really bad person who's out there to screw somebody over, in this case the U.S. government. It's I'm just somebody desperately trying to make it work in this country that I chose to come to for whatever reason, and I may have kids, I may have an elderly parent who needs to, whatever, there's nothing's black and white. So I think, and I think you should still feel comfortable reporting the fraud. I know that you can be comfortable. I think maybe you want to connect to an immigration lawyer first and have them sort of advise you a little bit so that you're not alone in navigating. I'm not saying you, obviously, but the person, right? But I don't think you should ever be afraid of coming forward and reporting a crime you've been a victim of. And I think that in New York, we're really lucky to have partners at every level of law enforcement that also believe that.
Hi, forgive me if you touched on this, but we all know that there are people here that are scared of getting deported. So that's why they're apprehensive to come and use your programs. My question is, if someone is here totally illegally with no visa, no nothing, and they get exploited because of that fact, do they still have the same services available to them that you provide to people who have some legal ground in the country?
Well, I mean, that is the entire reason why my unit was even created. So our unit was created because we recognize that people that are in this country and are undocumented are more vulnerable than the average citizen for the reasons that I talked about before. The fear of deportation, the distrust of government, the language barriers. So we absolutely recognize that. And that is specifically who we're targeting with this. So we want people to know, look, we get it. We know you're scared to come forward. But because of your, immigration status, you should not be an easy victim for people. We want you to be able to come forward. And I think even the federal government realizes that by the creation of the U visa. So yes, someone that is undocumented should feel just as comfortable coming to us as someone who is just an American citizen.
Greg, but before you ask question, I just want to request all my colleagues that please ask brief questions. We don't have too much time left, and I want that maximum number of people should ask questions. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Hi, my questions are for Ms. Rivera. I was wondering approximately how many immigration scam cases your office prosecutes per year, and also considering that so many immigrants are reluctant to come forward to report scams, do you see any difference since the city introduced ID NYC that they're less reluctant to come forward?
Well, like I said, we run a hotline, and so people call into our hotline when they, feel they've been the victim of a crime. We've gotten, since the hotline started, we get approximately 500 calls a week. All of those cases are looked into. Some of them are referred out because either we don't have jurisdiction, we only have Manhattan, or it's not specifically the type of crime that we handle, or it's, many times we just get immigration questions that we turn over to the New Americans Hotline or USCIS or other organizations. So in terms of how many calls, we've gotten over 4,000 calls since our hotline was created. Many of those have turned into investigations, others have turned into cases, not all of them. What was the second question?
NYC, the ID.
I can't say we've noticed a change yet. A year. Oh, yeah. No, we get approximately 500 calls a year. A year.
A lot of call
Yeah.
answering.
Yeah.
Okay, my question, this is. Okay. My name is Nazmul Hassan, and I publish a newspaper in Bangla language from New York City since 1994. My question is for Ms. Phyllis. Thank you very much for being here. Whatever we say and you say, people still in our immigrant community think USCIS as a deportation agency, because that is the news that comes out big in a way. Whatever services you provide, citizenship or adjustment of status, is very low in terms of people acceptance. But one thing I want to say about these things is that if you have any people go to these scam people like fake attorneys, because they have to spend so much money to get some information from the lawyers or their office that they just avoid it and go to those fake lawyers or fake consultants and pay money and lose everything in the end. Do you have any service targeted to this immigrant community which provides frequently asked questions like what are the delays, what are the process, and in our language, in Bangla language, and that we can, and another thing, if we need some kind of information from your department, it's very hard to reach and we don't know where to call. And if you have any services targeted to newspapers, medias about this, and your information going out, it will be helpful. Thank you.
And some of my colleagues may be able to answer this better, but we have a tremendous amount of information now on our website, which is sometimes a problem. But there's a new program called USCIS, which is a very good source of frequently asked questions and other issues. We have an information room in my building at 26 Federal Plaza with a great deal of information available, some of which is here. You don't need an appointment to come there, either on the first floor or the third floor. And I think a message we want you all to give out is our information is free. You don't have to pay for it. And I don't know how good we are in the languages that relate to your community, but I'm sure we have something. And please do look at our website and give us some recommendations as to how we can do better.
Anna?
Yeah, I'm Ana Nieto from El Diario. I have a question for each of you. The first one is for you. Since the executive orders were stuck in the court, I would like to know if you have noticed a spike on more frauds relating to this pending executive orders. The second question is for the Office of the Attorney. I would like to know what are the kind of crimes that are more often reported regarding fraud. And the last question is it's more a comment than a question is some of the people that are already in procedures regarding immigration, they are feeling anxiety just because they don't know the schedules. They don't know what is coming next. They don't know when the green card is gonna come, when their interview is gonna be on the schedule. They are waiting for months and they don't have answers. This is something that provokes a lot of anxiety. They don't know to what extent they haven't heard or their papers have been processed. It is something that can be done to alleviate that anxiety. Thank you.
I guess I'll start. The answer is yes. I mean, we definitely, once the president made his announcements, scams started skyrocketing. There's a new law, there's a new program, it's open now. Give me money, I'll get you ready to the front of the line. I know somebody, all iterations of what Mayerling was discussing earlier. Since the injunction came down, yeah, I mean, they continue. The problem, not problem, but you know, there's a lot of news coming out, but to the average community member who's, you know, going to work every day and taking care of their family and getting the kids to school and doesn't have time to read every single newspaper back to back, and right, they just see immigration, program, court, something. So then they go and they say, let me go and ask somebody for help. Let me ask somebody to explain this to me. And that's where, in that sort of vacuum, in the absence of any other options, that's when we see the scams cropping up. So yeah, and they play off the fact that more people are coming out to ask questions in the first place because they're seeing something in the news, but they're not super clear what it is. And then they take advantage of that. So we always see new scams, and we've started seeing it again with the U visa announcement, and people, you know, by Mayor de Blasio and then by the governor, people coming out and saying, what is this about U visas? And again, in the vacuum of no good answers or not enough people to give good answers, then that's where the scammers sort of occupy that space and use any advantage that they can.
And in terms of the most frequently reported, I talked before about the top 5 scams. It's basically, people that pretend to be lawyers when they're not, or people that are providing legal services when they're not authorized to do so. Within that are the notario scams. We have people that either pose as immigration officials or claim to have connections to immigration officials. We have actual immigration attorneys that are charging for services that they're not giving, that they're not providing. We have people that offer immigration options that don't exist. And lastly, people that are charging for things that are free, that people could get for free, like the USCIS forms.
And again, and I understand, I think as an American citizen, sometimes we don't appreciate what it's like for people to have to wait for these decisions that have such enormous impact on their lives, that they've also paid a good amount of money for. And I appreciate that. The reality is, it's not completely unpredictable how long your case is going to take. In fact, we have published on our website the sort of average processing times for how long it takes for a naturalization case to be done in New York, how long it takes for an adjustment of status case to be done in New York. Not that every case is smooth, but those are pretty good general parameters. We do have this website, myuscis.gov, and we also have a customer service telephone line, which sometimes can help people get through the system. We also have the ability to schedule an InfoPass appointment, an appointment to come to our office on the third floor to ask about the status of one's case. So appreciating that it can be very frustrating and anxiety-producing, there are some resources out there that can help people track the individual status of their case, but I think it's good going into any application to also have a sense of what we tell you as to how long the case is going to take. I can tell you here in New York, naturalization cases, we plan to have them done within 5 and 6 months, and right now adjustment of status is between 8 and 9 months. That doesn't mean every case is going to be done in that time phrase, but that's that time period, but it's our goal.
One thing to my
Yeah,
answer?
please.
Right. The other part of the answer is that the back and forth, right, that we are getting legalization, we're not. We're getting DACA DAPA, we're not, has really created desperation in our communities, and we're really seeing very significant increases in asylum scams, like people filing for asylum to get a free work permit when they don't qualify, and what's called the 10-year case scam, which is you're told that if you've been here 10 years and you have children in the US, you can get a green card, which is also not true, but that is alarmingly on the rise.
We'll be taking 2 more questions after this question because we are running out of time.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Khan, and I'm from one of the Pakistani TV channel, Playmax. My question is from Phyllis Coven's. The question is like next to my friend, this is the story of last Sunday, actually, before the attack on Brussels, One of my relative, he was coming back from my country, and he has been stopped by the immigration for more than 5 hours. And he was, he has been questioned very strange kind of questions, He was asking us that he has been asked whom you have been met over there in your stay over there, and which places you have been, visited over there. And, these sort of questions. And did you see Taliban, or did you see
Gulfam, can you make your question brief?
Yeah.
We are running out of time, please.
Yeah. He was, he has been asked sort of strange questions, what is the criteria for these questions, and who make this policy,
Again, those kind of questions and what happens at the airports is really not in my jurisdiction. But if you go on the website for Custom and Border Patrol, or you go on the website for something called Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, which is a section of the Department of Justice, if someone feels like they've been mistreated at an airport, there is a mechanism to raise those claims and have them be investigated.
Hi. I have 2 questions for all of you. First is, being that immigration is such a hot button topic these days, do you experience any resistance in helping immigrants? And also, I'm wondering what typically happens after an immigrant is scammed and then the criminal is prosecuted. What happens with that immigrant as far as your organizations are concerned? Thanks.
So in terms of what happens once an immigrant's scammed, sadly the answer is it depends, because many times the immigrant, what they want is their money back, because what I do is prosecute fraud, financial frauds against immigrants. So let's say someone, an immigrant goes to what they think is a immigration services provider. That person tells them, don't worry, I can get you a green card. I have a friend who works at USCIS, give me $5,000. That person takes every cent they have, they hand it over. All of a sudden, they can't find this person, they can't call, they can't contact them. They then report the crime to us. Hopefully at that point we can locate the perpetrator of the crime. We always try to get the money back. We try and get restitution for the victim. Sometimes we can, many times we can't. Many times that money is gone. We have a witness aid services unit, so we try and help the victim in other ways that our office can, connecting them to different agencies, if they have housing issues, whatever it is that we can do for the victim. So that's typically what happens in that scenario.
So, to your first question, well, I'm a lawyer and an immigrant advocate, so I'm nobody's favorite dinner party guest, right? But that's part of my job. No, some people don't appreciate the work that I and my organization do, and I think they're wrong, and I don't have a problem telling them that, and that's just sort of part of the dialogue that makes this country. In terms of what you can do for victims, you kind of really hit on one of the reasons why these crimes are actually really devastating, because there are so few immigration options, and one of the biggest problems that we face is that the fraud can very often make somebody ineligible. Because they have fraud in their file, maybe now they're not going to be able to qualify for a green card, but worse, usually somebody was in a position that they were in a situation that they were taken out of by the fraud, right? They were in a status that ended or that didn't get properly wrapped up, or I'm sort of trying to very much simplifying it, but they're put in a worse position because of the fraud. And and there's nothing that can be done. U visas are very difficult to obtain, and only in very specific situations can they be obtained for victims of fraud. Fraud crimes are not one of the crimes that make you eligible for U visa. You can ask sometimes for deferred action or some sort of leniency on the case, but there is no remedy in immigration for somebody who's been a victim of scams. And that we don't see this in New York, but certainly in other parts of the country, as we've heard of victims of scams actually being more focused on as a result of them having been a victim of, a known scammer. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we want to be so proactive in preventing people from becoming victims of scams, is because once you've become that victim, you may get your money back, but you may also have lost your ability to remain in the U.S. You may even be deported, be placed in deportation proceedings as a result.
So this is the last question. And I'm sorry, I know many of our friends want to ask questions, but they will be here maybe for a few minutes, so you can ask questions later on as well. So go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Vanya Andre. I'm from Haitian Times. Do you see scams coming out of a specific community more than other communities?
So I mentioned before, so we have a hotline, and our hotline has gotten approximately 500 calls a year for the past, since 2007 when our unit was created. It seems that over 40% of the calls that we get in Manhattan are from Spanish speakers. Now that could just be because of the population of Manhattan, but that's what we've seen. A few years ago, it seemed to be split between the Spanish-speaking community and the Chinese community. That seems to have changed. Now it seems to be a big portion of it in the Latino community.
Types of scams differ by communities as well. Some communities you may see more just pure, I'm making something up to tell you you qualify for a green card scam. Others may have more asylum fraud. It just sort of, sometimes by community, there's more trends like that, I think.
What's interesting is that what we do see consistently is that the defendant and the victims are from the same community.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you, Mayerling. Thank you, Camille. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. And if you have any other questions, you can certainly ask them now. Thank you for joining today. Thank you.